Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine Taylor-Klaus and Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Elaine and Diane here. It is one of our Let's Talk About the Issues that come up in our community episodes on the Parenting with Impact podcast. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Well, I think the title of this podcast episode is going to be Don't Make Your Kids Your Job.
Or something. We'll see what the title is. But the topic
is Don't Make Your Kids Your Job.
Are you making your kids your job? And what's the implication of that?
It's interesting. It's let's start because many of you are stay-at-home parents, and we don't want to dismiss that. Many of you are homeschooling your kids as well. And so part of your job may be responsibility for your kids or...
Let's be honest, whether you are working outside the home or not, part of your job is the job of parenting. There's no question we get that it's a key essential role that we all play, right? So we don't want to undermine that.
And I guess that the thing for me, Elaine, is when does it become a challenge? One of the things that I think about a lot in some of the personal development classes I've taken over time is this sort of our role becomes who we are, right? It's this sort of, I've been going through this. I don't know if when your kids moved out of the house, you went through this, but it was this sort of, I'm no longer day-to-day parenting, right? It's just I'm swooping in when the kids are in my realm. The one that's still at home is at a different house, not at my house. And so, when my nest became really empty, I went, okay, wait, reset. Who am I? How am I spending my time? What do I want to be doing? Right. And it's just sort of, there's a distinction between being responsible and taking care of your kids and making that kind of who you are. And that's what I think about is in terms of making it your kids your job. Where do you go with this topic?
Well, to me, it's not about whether the nest is empty or not. It's exactly. So I think that when my kids were younger and before I found coaching, I really was making it my job to make sure everything was okay, to make them okay, to it became almost an obsession to navigate their world to such an extent that I really lost any sense of my own world, my own life. Everything came first before me. And that's just something I still struggle with as I think a lot of us as moms struggle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Still.
But there was something different about it that was it was like I was a professional mom, right? I'm a smart, intellectual professional and my kids were struggling. So I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to be a professional in this realm, right?
What's coming up for me as you're talking about this, I remember back in corporate, we'd have the 360 review or we'd have a quarterly review with our managers or whatever else. And I think part of this is how are you evaluating your success as a parent? So yes, we have kids, they're our responsibility. I had a mom the other day who's I literally am not doing my job unless my kid, and I'm not doing my job as well as I can unless my kid is getting A's in a class.
Right.
And I was wow, is that true? Right? It's this sort of what part, and that's what this one is about for me is this sort of, where is your responsibility and how do you measure your success at doing and at playing this role? Because it is a role we all play. And I think that we get tripped up in, well, my kid isn't successfully launched, so I must not be doing my job, or my kid is struggling mightily, so I must not be doing my job well. It's the evaluation piece of it that becomes tricky for me.
Right. There's this correlation between their success equals how good am I as a parent.
Right.
And frankly, you can be the best parent in the world and your kid can still be really struggling. And those two are not mutually exclusive, right?
Yes, it's true.
And I think I want to say that again. Like, you can be the best parent in the world and your kid could still be struggling. And the kind of PS to that is, and you're not going to be a better parent by spending more and doing more and surrendering and sacrificing everything else. In some ways, maybe that makes you not even, sometimes that challenges how effective you're being as a parent when your kids start reacting to everything you say and do because they feel like they have no space. That's not healthy either, right?
Well, it's almost like, I feel like the word hypervigilance comes in here, and it's what happens. It's this sort of, if we don't know, okay, so the world says this is success, right? And right or wrong, this is like, there's measures out there that people think, oh, this is a successful child. They've done well in school. They've matriculated. They've, whatever the things are that the kids are going to do, right? And if we're sitting here going, okay, well, what does success look like for me as a parent? What is my measure of success? I think a lot of us don't take the beat to go, okay, what do I really think is successful if it's not the things that society says are about my kids, because I cannot literally control my kids and they're,
right.
I can help them and support them and influence them. But if it's like, it's going to be exhausting if you're measuring your success on an outcome that you don't ultimately
have any control over.
I hate to say it that way, but you don't.
Right. And so here's the story that's coming up. I had this really interesting conversation with my husband this summer. And so his mother used to always say, you're only as happy as your least happy child.
I like that.
And my husband thought I said that. But I, in fact, believe the opposite almost. And so he was attributing it to me, to someone else. And I looked at him, I'm like, I don't believe that. And so we had this really interesting conversation because I feel like if you're only as happy as your least happy child, that's actually not healthy for the whole family dynamic. I need to find my happiness based on me and how I am and what I'm bringing to the world, not whether my kid is in that moment thriving or not, or happy or not, or successful or not, or whatever.
Well, and it's that same thing as I'm only as successful as my least successful kid, right? It's just sort of that same sort of thing. Well, I think that's the piece of it is I don't think we take the minute to go, what is it that makes me happy? What is it that makes me feel successful? What is it that makes me feel like I'm thriving? And if you've hung that on somebody else's performance, it's exhausting, right? And the other side of, this just popped in, right, Elaine? The other side of that happens all the time in our community is I'm really upset and having a hard time and overwhelmed, and I want my kid to change so that I feel better.
Yeah.
I want my husband or my partner or whoever to change so that I can feel better.
I remember walking into my family room and my 3 kids were sitting and watching or gaming or something right in front of a screen, perfectly innocently, appropriately. And I walked in and I looked around and I started barking orders. Right. And I realized it was me that was overwhelmed because stuff wasn't getting done. They were just being kids, busy being kids, doing what kids do at a time that was appropriate for them to be doing it. There was nothing wrong with what they were doing. But I was stressed and I was letting that stress become, I need their performance to be different to make me okay. Right. And that is what really had to shift. That's probably what shifted for me more than anything with the coach approach, was realizing that it wasn't their performance wasn't what I was going for. My relationship with them, my connection with them, my ability to communicate with them, that's what set me up for success as a parent and set them up for success as kids.
Well, it's really interesting. I've been working with a couple of private clients around emotional dysregulation. And both the parents have challenges with emotional dysregulation and their kids have challenges with emotional dysregulation, right?
Not
And so
uncommon.
there's this order of operations where it's like they come in wanting to do something so that the kid doesn't get upset and the kid's
Right.
not losing their cool. And I'm like, what if we work it the other way around? It's almost like we feel justified, right? It's this sort of my upset is justified, my overwhelm is justified. They have to, right? It's just they have to change. And it's what we do when we get, and I'm thinking about your story a minute ago. It's just you're overwhelmed, your dysregulated brain goes, okay, y'all need to do something different so that I can stop feeling overwhelmed.
Right.
And that's such a common pattern.
Yeah.
And it's because we're dysregulated that we go into that pattern, right? So if we can calm down enough to go, okay, wait a second, I'm feeling overwhelmed. What do I do to solve that problem? You could have been like, okay, I really probably should do some things around the house. I wonder if I can enroll my kids to help me. That might be more fun than doing it by myself.
Right.
You might say, hey, kids, what time is your show over? I would really love some help to clean the kitchen or put the groceries away or whatever it is. But instead, because you're overwhelmed and stressed out, you're barking the orders. Is that fair?
Yeah. It's like how Runkle talks about it. He wrote Scream Free Parenting, and he talks about it in terms of what you're really saying to your kids is calm me down.
Yes.
Make me okay. Right. And so part of the challenge, so if we're going to go back to this original topic of are we making our kids our job? Part of it is we have to do our job, which is managing ourselves, regulating our emotions, taking care of ourselves, making sure we've got stuff on our plate that we care about.
Yeah.
So that it's not all about them. I have another topic that I want to bring in that I think is related to this, but let's take a quick break. Can we do that? And then
yeah, we can. And I have, and
it's like you've got one more too. All right. So two more things. We'll come back in just a minute.
Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Parenting with Impact podcast. We had a couple of things we're going to come back from the break to talk about. We're talking about ways in which we as parents have a tendency to make our kids our job and how maybe that's not the healthiest choice we could be making. Okay, Di, go.
What you were just saying before the break was about paying attention to yourself and your own needs. And one of the things that came up, and I don't remember where it was, in a group or something later, was an exercise that we could do to say, my needs are the most important in the room right now, right? And just to find 1 minute a day or 1 hour a day or like 2 hours a day or whatever it feels like is realistic for you, and say, okay, you know what? For the next 5 minutes, my needs are going to be the most important needs in the room. And it's this sort of exercise of saying, okay, just a little teeny tiny bit. Nobody's here. I'm going to go in the bathroom and close the door and say, for the next 2 minutes,
I'm staying here.
Some of you are laughing because I do have a client whose young adult child will not leave them alone in the bathroom, right? They just like, they have such a hard time being alone. But find that minute or find that 5 minutes or something. So that's my thing around that.
I love that. Well, I was thinking as you say that, like when I think part of what happened when I started shifting things when my kids were younger was I made a few key decisions. First of all, I decided, and I declared to them, I'm going to start going to the bathroom by myself. That was one thing. Another was I stopped eating dinner sideways. Right. I used to eat dinner sideways at the table so I could pop up in any minute. And I started eating dinner facing the table. And I assigned one of my kids as a hopper so that when I sat down at dinner, I typically didn't get up again. And what ended up happening as a result, that I don't think that I created this, I think theirs is I started becoming the first one served instead of the last one served. Mm-hmm. And it shifted to so we started dinner when I started eating. And so it wasn't this me not getting a bite or eating everybody else's food but mine or all of that other stuff, but really beginning to pay attention to the basics of it's okay to feed myself. to
Well, and this
prioritize
is the
that.
thing, right? It's just sort of, we talk about self-care all the time, right? And it's just, we're not talking about going to the gym or the bubble bath or the everything else. It's
We
just,
might be talking about any of it. But
yes, we're not just talking about those things, I
yes.
guess is my point. And
Yeah.
it's part of it is that you were like, okay, you know what?
It's basics.
I want to sit at the table and actually eat. I remember I used to eat whatever's left on everybody's plate. I mean, I went through that stage.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us as parents do. But again, it's just sort of, you're figuring out what you need. You're
Yes.
figuring out what you want to do and how you want to spend your time and finding time for that. And not, how many parents do you know who are like, I don't have any time for myself because my kids are so busy. Okay, that's a great opportunity to go, okay, so do we really need to be doing these 700 activities, or does everybody in the family get an activity? And so mom gets to go to pottery 2 times a month, just like kid number 2 gets to go to soccer 2 times a month or whatever.
Or do you bring it into that? I remember I used to take my kids to a sports practice, and then I would take that time to go for a walk and talk to friends.
Ooh, I did the same thing, or bring a book to sit in the soccer.
Right. So like, how do you,
in the car or whatever else, right?
How do you care for yourself, right? The other thing that I wanted to bring up related to this is another way. How do you know if you're making your kid your job? If you're facing what happens when they leave and you don't have anything to fill it in, if you're afraid that when they leave, you're not going to have anything to do, that probably means that you're doing more than you need to be doing or they need you to be doing. Because, and I'm not saying we don't scaffold and we don't support and all of that, but if all of your time is spent making it possible for them to function, that's something to pay attention to.
Right. So we've got a couple of pieces here. We've got the whole, how are you measuring your success? And are you measuring your success based on your kids' outcomes? We've got really just even giving yourself space and permission to take up space.
Yes.
Right. It's just sort of, and then this last thing to go, okay, wait, let me check myself and see, where are my priorities? And you can see it. Isn't it, there's a million coaches who would say the best way to tell what your priorities are to look at your calendar and how you're spending your time. You just made a face. I don't know if everybody saw that, but it's like this sort of, that's a great indication.
And for me, I prioritize my work, right? And I prioritize my family. It's very hard for me to prioritize myself and my work and my family. I usually have 2 out of 3 going on at any given time, and I'm working on it. Well,
and I think that the working on it is a thing. It's like, I color code. This is the difference between Diane and Elaine. I don't think you color code your calendar. Google Calendar, true story, has a color coding thing. And so anything that's personal, I color code one color. Anything that's work, I color code a different color. Anything that's a client. So it's like I have all my little color codes, and then I can look at the week, and Google will show me by color. I can see, woo, this week's pretty green, or this week's pretty purple, which is the personal time, right? It's just sort of, you can see and measure what percentage of my time in my calendar am I really spending on the things that I think are important to me, and not just the things that are required of me, which, yes, we have to do the things that are required for us, but we also want to try to fit in the other stuff.
Yeah. And I have to laugh because that would make me crazy. You're right.
You're right.
And I want to make the distinction between what's required of us and when we are doing more than that's required of us because we don't really know what else to do. And that's, I think when I talk about I used to make my kid my job. Mm-hmm. And it's because I didn't have anything else. And I actually needed to go back to work. It was the best thing I ever did for my kids, because when I had that much free time, it was all about them. And that wasn't good for them, and it wasn't good for me. So I also want to talk about paying attention to when we think we have to be doing something and when we're doing it, and maybe we're doing more than we need to. Like, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important.
It is important. And I think that doing more than we need to that's where the slippery slope lives. Because I think a lot of us are like, but they need help, but they this, but they that. And I think that's the piece that hopefully you've heard from us over time. Take aim. What are you working on? Look for the baby steps. Don't overwhelm yourself.
Don't try to do it all.
Trying to tackle everything at once. Yes. make your kids a priority and focus on things. But if you're, okay, wait, the kids are home, it's 3:00. What are the 17 things I need to talk to my kid about? That's a great opportunity to go, maybe I'm overdoing here. And there's an opportunity to take a step backwards.
Yeah. So, some of the tools that might help, I like your tool about looking at how you're spending your time. Something else that occurs to me is paying attention to your language. It's one thing to talk about, we've got to get our homework going when you've got an 8-year-old, but that language may need to shift when you're moving to a 14-year-old or a 16-year-old. Like, is it really we? Or is it their work and time for us to shift into support mode? So pay attention, I think, to the ways in which we aren't letting go of what it is to parent a young child as they move into their preteen and teen years, and how we need to shift how we're being with them in order to parent with a little more disconnect or distance, or a little more appropriate passing the baton to them. Awesome. What are you thinking?
No, I feel like
it's pretty good.
Anything else? I think we're pretty good.
I think that's a lot. I guess there's one other thing I want to say, which is this is not an invitation to beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Right. Never. We're not trying to make anybody wrong here. We just want to raise that awareness that this is something I think a lot of parents, a lot of moms in particular, struggle with. And it's an opportunity to pull back, regroup, look at the big picture and say, okay, how do I feel about how this is going for me? And what wants my attention in terms of paying attention to how I'm transferring ownership to them and how I'm taking care of myself.
So before we finish, take a minute and jot a note down. What insight have you had from our conversation?
What's your aha or awareness?
And what do you want to do different? What's an experiment you want to try for the next week? Maybe it's actually closing the bathroom door. Maybe it's color coding your calendar. Maybe it's just paying attention to how you're feeling and what is it that does make me smile and what is it that makes me happy, and not have it be about something somebody else does for you.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great week. We'll talk to you on the next one. Take care.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/Sanity School.